Okie dokie. Here's what I'll say about the 1997 Royal Rumble in terms of like a rough general outlier. Was that this was an event that was ultimately built around the hometown hero, so to speak, Shawn Michaels, coming to San Antonio and trying to win the WWF Championship from Psycho Sid. They ended up holding this event in the Alamo Dome. They did draw over 60,000 people. I will say that this was definitely not an event that felt like it deserved a big, huge 60,000 seat stadium venue. It didn't. At that time, though, we have to understand this is when the WWF was getting their asses handed to them in the ratings by WCW. WCW was in the middle of their run of 80 plus weeks of dominance in the ratings. They were doing a lot of damage to the WWF. And the WWF at the beginning of 1997 was a company that hadn't quite figured out what they were going to do. They hadn't quite figured things out just yet. But it is interesting to me, and I know a lot of people disagree with me when I say that I love going back and watching WWF of 1997 because I love seeing how the year started, excuse me, compared to how the year finished. And to me, it's the single biggest change that I think you'll ever see in a professional wrestling company in a 12-month stretch. Some may say, well, WCW in '96, but yeah, their real change didn't come until the middle of the year at Bash at the Beach '96 when Hogan turned heel and joined with Hall and Nash, and they became the NWO. But you look at how the WWF was presented at the beginning of 1997, like here at the Royal Rumble, and then you see how it was presented at the end of 1997. It's a stark contrast. It really, truly is night and day. And you could see that the pieces were starting to fall into place. And when you go back, and we have the benefit of going back and looking at it 17 years later, the benefit of being able to look at it through the scope of history, we see where some of the pieces were in place. And maybe the WWF hadn't fully figured out exactly what all they had, but they knew they were onto something. They knew they were getting close to figuring it out. It was just a matter of not if, but when they were actually going to do so. Perfect example of that to me is the first match. You've got Hunter Hearst Helmsley versus Goldust for the Intercontinental Championship. They kind of already knew what they had in Goldust. But I think this is when the WWF maybe was slowly starting to realize, and they maybe were realizing it back in '96 a little bit, that this guy was a good worker, that he was a student of the game, that he was hungry, that he wanted it. But they were starting, I think, to really figure out here at the beginning of '97 just what a talent Triple H was. They were still calling him Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and all of that. They hadn't quite fully figured out what to do with him. They hadn't figured out what to do to make him Triple H yet. But it's interesting when you see where Hunter Hearst Helmsley was at the beginning of 1997, and you see where he was here at the end of 1997. A good feud, a good solid IC title match, a good match to open the show. Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, excuse me, defeats Goldust. It is what it is. But again, like I said, you're talking about planting seeds here. And like I said, when I look back at it from a historical standpoint, it's striking to me how much things changed just in that 12-month stretch. The next match, you had Ahmed Johnson and Farouk. And this one, this was kind of hot. This one had a lot of intrigue for me, at least, as a black man watching this feud. You had Farouk being backed by the Nation of Domination here. This match only went a few minutes before it ended in disqualification, all types of chaos. But it is funny when you look back, you would have thought back at the beginning of 1997 that Ahmed Johnson was going to be the big time player here, and he was going to be a franchise piece for the WWF for 5 to 10 years to come. He had so much going for him. On paper, you thought that he was going to be a signed, sealed, delivered main eventer. Never came to be, but again, it's interesting to see where he was in 1997 and see that they weren't having Farouk running in with the damn Spartan helmet anymore. They had put him in a role that fit him very well, that was legitimate, that people believed, and a lot of people, frankly, understood what the Nation of Domination was representing. Sure, this was a blatant ripoff, and that's sometimes the best thing to do, a blatant ripoff of the Nation of Islam. And during the mid-'90s, Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam were generating a lot of publicity, a lot of press, a lot of negative press, some due, some not due to them. Um, but they were in the headlines. And this was a way to take a militant black faction and try and create some stars. And that's exactly what they did. And Farouk was perfectly cast in the role at that time, at the beginning of 1997, to kind of be the leader. So I like this going back and watching it, even if the match was nothing special. You had Vader versus Undertaker, and what a novel concept. Whereas Shawn Michaels won't do the job for Vader at SummerSlam 96, and start a real matter of business and a full program with him. And you hear Jim Cornette talk about it in his one kayfabe commentary video, where he's talking about part of the thing with this Royal Rumble was that it was supposed to be the blow off to Vader and Shawn Michaels. They were supposed to work SummerSlam 96. That's where Vader won the belt from him. Then you would have Survivor Series 96. They would have their big rematch. And then Royal Rumble 97 would be where the big blow off was. Shawn, the hometown kid, comes back home. He takes on Big Van Vader, beats him, and becomes the WWF champion again. But of course, that never happened, and we won't talk about that here. But it's disappointing when you think about the possibilities of what could have been. But feature that, though. The Undertaker did the job for Vader here. Vader at this time wasn't getting a lot of victories, but he beat The Undertaker at a Big Four pay-per-view. You could say, well, that was due to interference with Paul Bearer and all this other crap. Yeah, that's true, but hey, that's how it goes. But interesting to go back and see that Vader actually beat Taker. Pinned him. The next match was a six-man luchador match that maybe is the most awkward match in Royal Rumble history. I understand what the WWE was going for here. I do. This is back in '97. They were bringing in these luchadors and this and that. And, they were trying to maybe copy what ECW and WCW were doing with the luchadors. And WWE really didn't understand them, had no clue how to utilize them or function with them. And I don't think they really were clicking with the WWF audience at that time either. But you're in San Antonio. You figure you're going to have a large Hispanic fan base in that area. Give them a match with some faces that might be very familiar to them, some people that they can relate to, and some people that they can get behind. But this match, it's sometimes here's what I say about those lucha libre type of matches. It's a lot of flying head scissors and hurricane ranas and a lot of choreographed bullshit. That's the way I look at it sometimes. And that's what this match kind of felt like to me. It's like as you're sitting there watching, you're like, is it done yet? Is it done yet? Take it home, boys. Take it home, boys. And it just kept going and going and going and going. Unfortunately for us that had to watch it. And now I've had to watch it several times. And that's enough for me. So, interesting thing to note here with the 97 Royal Rumble pay-per-view is the Royal Rumble match did not main event the show. And ultimately, that was the right call because this show was built around the hometown kid, Shawn Michaels, trying to win the WWF Championship from Psycho Sid. So, the Royal Rumble match didn't need to main event this show. As I went back and watched this Rumble match, I've remembered a few things. I remembered how stupid I thought it was at the time that they did the fake Diesel and fake Razor Ramon gimmicks. How bad. God, it was bad. Oh, we've got their names. We own the rights to their names, so let's use them. And this is where you look back and you say, you look at Kane and you understand between being Isaac Yankem and being fake Diesel, you sit there and say, you know what, this guy paid his dues. And he put up with a lot of shit. He was saddled with some really shitty, bad gimmicks. But by the end of 97, at Bad Blood, here comes motherfucking Kane. And he hasn't looked back since. It's tremendous. Like I said again, talking about this, and this is a lot of what you see here in 97 at the beginning of the year at this Royal Rumble pay-per-view. You see dramatic change between the beginning of the year and the end of the year. This, to me, at the beginning of 97 was still in a lot of ways Vince trying to be more wholesome, all-American, really, frankly, being out of touch with what was going on in pop culture at the time. This was at a time where Jerry Springer was creating all types of controversy and getting all types of monster ratings, and Crash TV was very, very big. Marilyn Manson was incredibly huge. the WWF at the time was just completely out of touch. And you see that here in the beginning portions of 97 with this Royal Rumble pay-per-view when you go back and watch it. There's no question about it. There's no question about it. Some of the other interesting things with this Royal Rumble match, yeah, anytime you see Mick Foley and Terry Funk fighting each other, it's like two old bitter drunks trying to win a pissing contest. I think that's fucking awesome. These guys are fucking awesome, period. I do find it funny also that Mil Mascaras made an appearance on this Royal Rumble and he ultimately eliminated himself. Imagine that. He wasn't doing the job for anybody. It still cracks me up to this day. Oh, God. What cracks me up even more about this is the fact that fake Diesel was in the final three. So, of course, the way this whole thing ultimately ended up being done was that Austin had been eliminated, but due to the distraction of Mick Foley and Terry Funk fighting on the outside, none of the referees actually saw that Stone Cold Steve Austin got eliminated. As a result, Austin comes back in, eventually eliminates Bret Hart, and wins the 1997 Royal Rumble. Right timing, right guy wanted in the right situation. Unfortunately, what happened was that things got very screwy in the WWF over the next couple of months. You get Shawn Michaels in the main event. He wins the belt from Sid. Where it was funny, when you go back and watch it, Survivor Series 96, Shawn was getting booed. And when Sid won the belt from Shawn, he got a big, huge monster pop because people were resenting the way Shawn Michaels was being packaged and presented and rammed and crammed down their throat. They just like Psycho Sid better. Now, here at the Royal Rumble 97, you get Shawn Michaels. He wins the belt. Yay! All the people in San Antonio are happy, I guess. Only to have Shawn Michaels very quickly after that hand over the title. And then you get this big quagmire where there's like a freaking four-way at the next In Your House pay-per-view. I think it was Austin and Bret and Taker and Vader. And then yeah, that's who it was. And then Taker wins that. You got Austin and Bret split off for their Mania match. No, actually, I apologize. It was Bret won the belt, and then the next night he lost it due to Austin's interference. That's how you split off into Stone Cold and Bret at WrestleMania 13 in that legendary submission match. So in some ways, it kind of feels like this was a wasted Royal Rumble win for Stone Cold Steve Austin because he didn't even get a title shot at Mania. Very odd. Even though that was technically the stipulation that he got a title shot at Mania, Austin wins the Rumble here just to use it as a plot device to set up him and Bret in a submission match at WrestleMania 17. But Austin is the perfect example here of what I was talking about and been talking about throughout this video. At the beginning of 97, I think WWF excuse me, was really starting to realize they might have something here with Stone Cold Steve Austin. They weren't fully sure what yet. They didn't know just how over he could truly get. But they knew that they had something. They knew that he was starting to resonate with the crowd, even though he was supposed to be a heel, that there was something different about him, that people were resenting and rebelling against the fact that they were being forced, having it forced upon them to boo him. They were starting to cheer him and cheer him very loudly and support him very loudly anyways, no matter what you were trying to do. And you see at the beginning of 97, and then you see where he progressed throughout 1997 to the end of 1997, again, a dramatic change in the way a character was presented in the case of Stone Cold Steve Austin even. So, like I said, this pay-per-view here, even the main event match, it wasn't that bad, but, I'm always going to side with Sid over Shawn Michaels. Oh, fuck yeah. I like Sid so much better than Michaels, no question. This is a show here that I didn't think was all that good from a pure wrestling show standpoint. But when I look at it again from a historical context, I think it's incredibly compelling to go back and watch where the company was at the beginning of the year and where they ended up at the end of the year. You see some of the pieces falling into place. You see some of the characters that are there, some of the performers that are there. And it makes you remember, hey, you know what? Things aren't always rosy. But this was really the beginning of what I thought was a really good year in the WWE in 1997. So, it's one of those things, if you really want to see the start of Stone Cold Steve Austin becoming a big star, you need to watch this pay-per-view. If you're not into that type of stuff, this is probably a Royal Rumble for the most part that you can skip.